I'm Francis, standing in the middle of my wedding reception, surrounded by 300 stunned guests. I watched as my father's face turned as white as a sheet. His words, "She is a gold digger, just like her mother," still hung in the air, but what came out of the speakers next changed everything. I had been waiting for this moment for 11 months. I walked calmly to the DJ booth, smiled at the sound engineer, and pressed play on a recording that had been sitting in my phone. My father's voice, slightly slurred from what sounded like a late-night call, filled the room. "Hey babe, it's me. Lisa's lawyer is useless. I moved the house, Mom's house, into the LLC last month. She'll never find out. By the time the judge signs off, it's done." As the recording played, I was taken back to 14 years ago. I was 14 when my mother, Lisa, packed 2 suitcases and told me we were leaving. She came into my room at 9:30 on a Tuesday, still in her nurse's scrubs. "Pack what you need. We're going," she said. I grabbed my backpack, textbooks, a toothbrush, and my phone charger. I didn't think to take the family photos on the hallway wall. Little did I know I'd never see them again. My father, Henry, stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed. He didn't try to stop us. He didn't ask where we were going. Instead, he looked at my mother, then at me, and said, "Go take the ungrateful one with you." I was 14, and I'd done nothing wrong. I'd made the honor roll that semester and cleaned the kitchen every Sunday without being asked. But in my father's eyes, standing beside my mother made me the enemy. My mother drove in silence. I held my backpack on my lap and watched the street lights blur. I was too confused to cry. Within a week, my father called every relative on his side of the family. His version of the story was simple. Lisa left because she found someone else. She'd been lying to him for years. It was a lie, but he said it with such conviction that people believed him. The church, his golf buddies, and even my paternal grandmother, who'd known my mother for 15 years, all believed his story. Nobody called to ask me what happened. I was 14 and already invisible. My father didn't call me for 6 months. When I finally called him, he picked up on the 3rd ring. His voice was flat. "If you're calling to ask for money, you're just like her," he said. I hung up and sat on the edge of my mother's rented bed, staring at the wall. My mother worked the night shift at Mercy General Hospital, often for 12 to 14 hours. She'd come home at 6 o'clock in the morning, make me toast, check my homework, and then fall asleep on the couch, still in her scrubs. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on Elm Street. The carpet was old and stained, and the kitchen faucet dripped. My mother slept in the bedroom, and I slept on a pull-out sofa in the living room. We did our homework at the kitchen counter because we didn't own a desk. Meanwhile, my father lived in the 4-bedroom house my paternal grandmother had left him. It was in a nice neighborhood with a big yard and a quiet street, where people waved from their porches and knew each other's dogs by name. During the divorce, my father told the court his income was lower than it actually was. My mother's lawyer was a legal aid attorney handling 35 cases. He did his best, but it wasn't enough. The judge signed off on a settlement that gave my mother $35,000. My maternal grandmother, Rose, helped us when she could. She'd drive over with groceries and slip a $20 into my coat pocket when I wasn't looking. She lived on a fixed income from Social Security and a small pension from the local library, where she'd worked as a librarian for 28 years. At school, a girl in my English class asked me during lunch, "Didn't your dad say your mom is a home wrecker?" The rumor had spread from my father's church circle to the school parking lot in under a month. I ate the rest of my sandwich in the bathroom stall. I kept my grades up because scholarships were my only way out. When I got the acceptance letter for a full ride to state college, my mother held it in both hands and cried harder than the night we left. My father didn't know I'd been accepted. I didn't tell him, and he never asked. "Your mother didn't leave because she's weak, sweetheart. She left because she's brave," my grandmother Rose told me once. It took me a long time to believe that. I graduated summa cum laude with a full scholarship and no debt. I became an English teacher at a public high school 15 minutes from my mother's apartment. The pay wasn't great, $42,000 a year before taxes, but it was mine. I graded papers at night, drove a 12-year old Toyota Corolla, bought my groceries at the local market, and packed my lunches in Tupperware. I still tried to keep a relationship with my father. Maybe because I remembered being 5 years old, sitting on his shoulders at the carnival, believing he was the strongest man in the world. Maybe because I thought if I showed up enough, he'd finally see me. He'd call a few times a year, always with conditions. Come to Christmas, but don't bring your mother's drama. So I went alone. One Christmas, across from me at the table sat a woman named Victoria. My father introduced her as a friend. She was 40, with a sleek bob and a designer handbag. She sat in my mother's chair. I smiled, ate the turkey, and said, "Everything's delicious." My aunts and uncles treated me like a guest. Uncle Tom patted my shoulder and said, "Your dad's been through a lot. Don't make it harder." I was 22, with a full-time job, a clean apartment, and a savings account I'd built from nothing. But in that house, I was still the girl who'd chosen the wrong side. I kept going back for 3 years, swallowing their looks and their silence.
Danny met Ethan.
I met Ethan at a coffee shop near my school. He was sitting at a corner table with a stack of legal files, a cold coffee, and a pen behind his ear. I knocked his briefcase off the chair while reaching for a napkin. I apologized and he laughed. He had a warm laugh that reached his eyes. He was a real estate attorney at a small firm downtown. He drove a Honda Accord and wore the same 4 ties in rotation, but he listened. Really listened. We dated for 2 years, slowly and steadily. He never once asked about my father's money. He didn't know there was any to ask about. When I introduced Ethan to my father, Henry was polite but cold. He shook Ethan's hand, asked about his firm, and smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. After dinner, when Ethan went to the restroom, my father leaned across the table and said, "He's a lawyer. You know what lawyers do, right? They dig into people's business." I didn't answer. He was talking to himself. Ethan proposed on a Sunday morning in my apartment. He made pancakes, put the ring in his pocket, and said, "I want every Sunday to be like this." I said yes before he finished the sentence. I called my father to tell him. There was 10 seconds of silence. Then he said, "I hope he knows what he's getting into." That was his congratulations. What I didn't know then was that the next day, my father started a campaign. He called Aunt Sue, Uncle Tom, and his church friends. The message was the same everywhere. Frances is marrying a rich lawyer. She's changed. She's just like her mother. 11 months before the wedding, a Saturday afternoon, I was at my mother's apartment helping her pack boxes. She was downsizing because the 1-bedroom on Elm Street had become too expensive. While sorting through the hall closet, I found a shoebox on the top shelf. Inside were old sneakers, a few receipts, a folded piece of paper, and underneath everything, a USB drive with a strip of masking tape on it. Someone had written on the tape in blue ink, "From V. You should hear this, Mom." My mother looked at the USB. Her face went still. "Put it back, Frances," she said. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer and reached for it. I pulled my hand away, went to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and plugged in the USB. There was one audio file, 3 minutes and 10 seconds long. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. "Hey babe, it's me. Lisa's lawyer is useless. I moved the house, Mom's house, into the LLC last month. She'll never find out. By the time the judge signs off, it's done. And Frances, don't worry about her. She's an ungrateful brat. She chose Lisa. Fine. She gets nothing, just like her mother. Once this is settled, you move in. This house is ours. Lisa will never know." I sat on my mother's kitchen floor and played it again and again. The third time, I wasn't listening for the words. I was listening for the man I thought I knew, and he wasn't there. My mother stood in the doorway, crying. "Victoria sent that to me after she and your father broke up. I think she wanted to hurt him or help me. I kept it because I was afraid to use it and afraid to throw it away," she said. I sat there for 2 hours, then called Ethan. "I need you to look at something as a lawyer," I said. Ethan came over that night. I handed him the USB, without saying anything. He plugged it in, pressed play, and listened with his hands folded on the table. When it finished, he didn't speak for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up the county assessor's website. It took him 10 minutes. Francis, his voice was careful. Your grandmother's house, the one your father lives in, was transferred into an LLC 16 months before the divorce was finalized. The LLC is registered to your father and a woman named Victoria. He turned the screen toward me. There it was in black and white. The house my grandmother had left to my father, appraised at $650,000, had been quietly moved out of his name and into a shell company before the court ever divided anything. My mother received $35,000 in the divorce. She should have received half. This is fraud, Ethan said. Your mother can file a civil suit to recover her share. The voicemail isn't definitive on its own, but combined with the property records, it's strong. I drove to my mother's apartment the next morning. I showed her the records and played the voicemail one more time. I laid it all out. She sat at her kitchen table and shook her head. I don't want to fight him anymore, Francis. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Okay, Mom. I kept everything, the USB, the records, the screenshots. I didn't plan to use any of it, not then, not at my wedding. That decision came later, because my father forced my hand. 6 months before the wedding, I sent my father an invitation. It was on cream cardstock with gold lettering. I'd paid for it with 2 weeks of tutoring money. I included a handwritten note. I'd really like you to be there, Dad. He called the next day. I'll be there, he said. For a stupid, hopeful second, I thought maybe he'd changed. He hadn't. 2 weeks later, Aunt Sue called me on a Tuesday evening. She sounded uncomfortable. Honey, your dad is telling everyone you're marrying for money. He told me Ethan's some big shot lawyer, and you latched on. He said you're just like your mother. There it was, the same story, the same label 14 years later. I don't believe him, Sue said quickly. But you should know he's been calling people, Tom, Pastor Mike, even some of Ethan's family. He got numbers from the RSVP list. My stomach dropped. He'd contacted Ethan's family, my future in-laws, and was already poisoning them against me. I told Ethan that night. He sat on the edge of our bed, quiet for a long minute. If you want him there, I support you. But I need you to know that Jake and I have everything ready just in case. Jake was Ethan's colleague, a family law attorney. I knew what just in case meant. I knew what was in the file Jake had been building for weeks. The property records, the voicemail transcript, and the civil complaint drafted and ready to file on my mother's behalf. I nodded, but I prayed I wouldn't need any of it. 2 weeks before the wedding, my father called again. I'm doing the father's toast. It's tradition, he said, no greeting, no small talk. Of course, Dad, I replied. And I want to talk to the wedding planner. I have things I need to coordinate. I closed my eyes. I'll give you her number. There was a pause. Then his voice dropped. I hope Ethan knows that marrying you doesn't make him family. My family has standards. I sat very still. My pen stopped moving on the essay. I was grading. I could hear the refrigerator humming. Ethan looked up from his book. I didn't respond. I ended the call, set my phone on the table, and stared at it like it might ring again. It didn't. That night, I called my grandmother Rose. She picked up on the first ring. He's going to do something at the wedding, Grandma. I know, sweetheart. Men like your father can't let other people be happy without making it about themselves. A man who has to tear others down is a man who's scared of what they'll find when they stand up, she said. I made my decision. I pulled the voicemail file from my laptop onto my phone, checked the playback. It was clear and unmistakable. I plugged it in, backed it up onto a second USB, and handed the spare to Ethan. Tell Jake to bring the envelope. Ethan nodded. No questions. He already knew. The next morning, I called Aunt Sue. Sue, you said Dad was practicing his toast. What did you hear? She hesitated. I was at his house for dinner last Sunday. He was in the study with the door open. I heard him reading something out loud. Francis, it wasn't a normal toast. He was practicing something about your mother. My stomach tightened, but my hands were steady. I called my wedding planner, Sarah. Is there a way to skip the father's toast? Just have the best man and the maid of honor? Sarah paused. Your father already confirmed with the DJ. He specifically asked to go right after the best man speech. I assumed you'd approved it. He'd gone around me. Of course he had. I called my father. I kept my voice light. Dad, Ethan's best man has a really long speech planned. Maybe we cut the father's toast to save time. There was silence. 5 seconds. 10. Are you trying to silence me? This is exactly what your mother did, he said. I knew then that if I canceled the toast, he'd make a scene some other way. At least with the scheduled toast, I knew exactly when it would happen. I could be ready. I called the DJ, Mark. If I come to the booth during the reception, you hand me the cable. No questions. Mark said, you got it. That night, I lay in bed counting the distance from our table to the DJ booth. Ethan lay beside me, holding my hand in the dark. Neither of us spoke. I counted 17 steps. I practiced the route in my head until I could walk it with my eyes closed. The morning of my wedding was bright and clear. I stood in the bridal suite at the Orchard venue, a beautiful place with wooden beams and string lights. My mother stood behind me, adjusting a pin in my hair. You look beautiful, baby, she said. I covered her hand with mine. In the mirror, we looked alike. I used to hate that resemblance because my father treated it like proof of something bad. Now I wore it like armor. I pulled my phone from the vanity, opened the audio file, tapped play for half a second, just long enough to hear the first syllable of my father's voice, then stopped. The battery was at 100%. I had a Bluetooth backup speaker in my maid of honor's clutch. The USB was with Ethan. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Jake's at table 6. Envelope in his jacket. Ready. I typed back a heart and put the phone in the hidden pocket my seamstress had sewn into the left seam of my dress. I walked out. 300 guests filled the ceremony lawn. White chairs, flowers along the aisle. The string quartet played something beautiful. Everything was perfect. I passed my father in the hallway. He stood near the entrance, adjusting his cufflinks. You look nice, he said. Not beautiful. Not I'm proud of you. Just nice. I smiled back and kept walking. The ceremony was perfect. The vows, the rings. Ethan's voice cracked when he said, I do. The whole crowd laughed, and I loved him so much in that moment that I almost forgot what was coming. We kissed. People cheered. We walked back up the aisle together. For a few minutes, I let myself believe that maybe my father would surprise me. Maybe the toast would be kind. Maybe this one time he'd choose his daughter over his ego. The reception started. Cocktails, dinner, toasts from the best man and the maid of honor. Both were funny and warm. 3 hours passed. People danced, people laughed. The cake was chocolate with buttercream, and it was perfect. Then the MC picked up the microphone. And now, the father of the bride would like to say a few words. My father stood up, adjusted his tie, picked up the microphone, and smiled at me the way he always did right before.